Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Whenever you are watching this video, I hope you're enjoying it and I hope it helps you understand social disorganization theory. This theory comes from a branch of American criminology that we refer to as the Chicago School of Criminology. Don't get confused by that. It's still part of the positive school of criminology. It's simply one of a few theories that originated from the University of Chicago in the Department of Sociology. What we have here for social disorganization theory is a theory that tries to apply our understanding of urban development to an application that can explain juvenile delinquency and crime. It's had a long history, and like a lot of theories that have emerged over the 20th century, it went through a period where it was appreciated, and then a period of decline, and then a period of rebirth. And right now, we are firmly into that period of rebirth where there's a new appreciation for it. I want to point out a couple of things here, just briefly, that you can focus on as you review the literature related to social disorganization theory and the development that has occurred over the past 70 or 80 years. So first, some of you might refer to social disorganization theory as the concentric zone theory. Please don't do that. Park and Burgess developed the concentric zone theory, where we see that bullseye map to explain the different rings or areas of an urban area that explain how urban places developed after the period of industrialization, in particular cities in the United States. In Chicago, we have to think, after industrialization, we have this place that grew rapidly. The population increased 20-fold maybe in 20 years, and it has become, and it still is, one of the biggest cities in the United States of America. But you have to think about what it was like in the 1800s and early 1900s, with it being kind of the anchor point of the Midwest for distribution of goods that were produced in the Northeast. We had railroad lines going to Chicago. We had shipping lanes going through the Great Lakes, to Chicago. And then after the Civil War, we see a lot of people interested in prosperity and the American dream moving from the South to the Chicago area. So it was a destination for commerce, for economics, for people, and it's a good symbol for everything that the United States had to offer with the 20th century development. But that concentric zone theory, that's just the beginning part of social disorganization theory. Park and Burgess had students in the Department of Sociology who became interested in it, and that's where we see social disorganization theory develop. Sean McKay wrote the book Juvenile Delinquency in Urban Areas, and what they wanted to do was take that theory of urban development, the concentric zone theory, and apply it to the study of juvenile delinquency. What they identified with their sociological demographic background, as good students of demographers, they knew how to collect macro level data and apply it to different levels of understanding. And they looked for things, and there are three key things that were strong anchor points for the development of social disorganization theory. Poverty, ethnic and cultural heterogeneity, and dilapidation. When we look at those things, they looked at other things too, like rates of disease and unemployment, other economic indicators. What we see is Sean McKay described those characteristics as indicating areas that had a greater presence of social disorganization. What they found was when they overlaid the rates of all those different characteristics with the rates of juvenile delinquency, they found that they matched up. Areas that had more of those problems had more juvenile delinquency. And as they identified that, they wrote it into a theory of social disorganization. There was a great big presumption on their part to think that those indicators of social stress were actually causing social disorganization. And that social disorganization was what caused the juvenile delinquency to occur. What I want you to think about is that indirect route that Sean McKay described. They had these indicators of social disorganization, and then that social disorganization caused juvenile delinquency. And from their theory, we could probably define social disorganization as the inability of a neighborhood to regulate the behavior of its residents. So we have to think about what data they had available to them. That would be things like infant mortality rates or unemployment rates, the percentage of foreign born in an area, things like that. They measure what they measure, but Sean McKay were saying those are indicators of social disorganization. They made a great big leap from the data that they had available to an understanding of the context for those neighborhoods, that inability to regulate behavior. As time marched on and different editions of their book were produced, the data didn't really match up. When we get to post-World War II, into the 1950s and 60s and the development of suburbs, the urban landscape changed. People moved out of urban areas, and there was some breakdown in the data or the evidence that could be drawn from the data that were available to confirm this relationship with social disorganization theory. So it faded away. And a good understanding of how it faded away and how it could come back comes from that 1998 article from Bob Bersick that I asked you to read. That's in the folder on Moodle, and I wanted everyone to read that, not just one select classmate. So read through that. I want you to see what Bersick describes as the problems with social disorganization theory and the development of opportunities to have it reemerge. Now, how it reemerges is from the research of Sampson and Groves. And Sampson and Groves' research, what they did was they tried to find more direct measurements of disorganized communities. So I want you to pause and think, well, how could you actually use your research skills to identify and observe or measure the disorganization in a community? Sampson and Groves came up with some unique strategies, and things like how many of your friends live within a short walk of your house. I want you to think, well, what does that represent? That doesn't really represent disorganization or organization, but it might show how many people in a community really care about the other people in their community. That was a landmark study in 1989, and it paved the way for further development. A lot of that development came from Rob Sampson and other colleagues in the development of what we refer to now as collective efficacy theory. Now, collective efficacy, as opposed to social disorganization, can be defined as the ability of a community to come together for a common purpose or goal. The common purpose or goal for many communities is to fight crime, to make that community safer. And what Sampson and his colleagues have done is tried to identify new strategies for identifying those neighborhoods that have that ability to come together. And what we find is that it's not necessarily poverty or ethnic heterogeneity that causes a community to be bad. That's too easy. There are communities that have a lot of poor people in them that are really connected and strong. And what Sampson's research through collective efficacy has proven is that those poor neighborhoods that are suffering from a lot of different distressing characteristics, they can come together for that common purpose of fighting crime. And he's found a way to measure that, to document that, and show that the communities are interested. And now we know that even in poor communities in urban areas, there can be neighborhoods that are strong at fighting crime. And that's a pretty important thing to consider, because then it gives us an opportunity to say, well, even where there are few resources, where people are, say, more economically insecure, what can we do to make those communities stronger? And we end up finding out that a lot of informal social control happens when people come together, and we can prevent crime. That's not expensive. We can use the expensive resources like law enforcement to do other things that might require greater skill or greater effort. But when people just come together to fight crime, we find a lot of success. Now that's not without any controversy for sure, because some of the neighborhoods that need the most help have the hardest time getting people to come together and trust each other. They also don't trust the police a lot. So these communities are challenging for our crime prevention efforts. But in terms of theory, they're really interesting to study. Excuse me. So I ask you to go through that literature, try to measure that change in the theory that has happened, and try to apply that to your own interests and what makes a community work together, or what makes a community more conducive to crime or protecting itself from crime. I've thrown a couple of other things on the Moodle page, like that American Murder Mystery. That research is kind of interesting. It's not academic, it's from popular culture, it's from a magazine, but it kind of shows some of the same connections that we're studying here in social disorganization theory. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope it gives you a few things to discuss in the discussion forum. So I look forward to your comments. If you have questions about anything, please feel free to email me or get in touch with me. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you think about this theory. It's one that I enjoy a lot because I think it has a lot of power to what we can do out in the real world. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy it.